Lesbian Detectives. Unsolved cases. She's still missing. Yeah, they haven't found her yet. Well, let's talk about it.
They say he vanished without a trace. Could it be a psychotic break or a tragic accident? Police don't know where the body went. Unsolved murders, body still missing. That's unheard. Where's the witness? Lesbian detectives, what's going on? City on high alert, this out the norm. He did what, the who? Man, that ain't real, these crimes ain't true. Then come uncover these theories with us. We live right now, tuning in is a must.
Right now, Lesbian Detectives. Lesbian Detectives. We about to start the show, so get your popcorn ready to go. Pay attention to the message. I present to you the Lesbian Detectives.
This is Lesbian Detectives. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And we are here talking about missing and unsolved murders.
We are discussing cases that you have forgotten about or never even heard of.
So sit back, relax, and let's start this podcast. Guys, we are back with another case. And this one, I feel like I am getting outside of my box a little bit. I did a serial killer and now I'm doing something a little bit more different.
Okay.
I'm like, gotta pat myself on the back. I mean, I feel like starting true crime, you learn so much. And you also learn like what really gets your blood racing. And I think I found some cases that really get my blood racing.
Mine is my anxiety.
What makes your anxiety go haywire?
True crime.
What kind of true crime? That's what the
All
point.
crime.
Okay. Is it the kids or?
It's the danger.
Okay. Let's get into the case. And to let you know, I'm still sick. I thought I got better. Then my daughter got sick. And then I got sick. So here's my sick voice on this episode. I feel like we have got sick a couple times.
It's the beauty that comes with kids.
Right. We had COVID, the flu. I don't even know what this one is.
Kids are gross.
Very. Now let's get into the episode. In the summer of 1960, a small child vanished without a trace in a quiet town. One moment she was playing outside, and the next she was gone, abducted in broad daylight by two strangers in a green car. Despite frenzied searches and the mystery of her family, no clues emerged. Her disappearance left the town shaken, but the case soon grew cold. Months passed and the search stalled. Then, on a screaming hot summer day, the desert whispered a secret. A group of boys exploring the remote wilderness of Arizona stumbled upon a child remains, buried beneath the harsh sun. The body, nearly skeleton, was that of a small child, abandoned and left to die in the unforgiving land. Authorities were left with no leads, no identity, just the chilling presence of an unclaimed child. For years, she became known as Little Miss Nobody, a tragic figure whose story remained a mystery. Her identity remained hidden as investigators scanned old missing people report. But nothing matched. The case seemed hopeless, and the girl in the desert was forgotten by all but few. Then over 6 decades later, technology uncovered a haunting truth. The child found in the desert was not unknown. She was the same child who had been snatched away in 1960. But the question only deepened. How had she ended up so far from home? Who had taken her? And why had they left her in the desert? Though the truth of her identity was revealed, the mystery surrounding her adoption and death remains. The shadow of the past still held tight to its secrets, and the killer, elusive and cold, has never been found. The desert had kept its silence, but for how much longer? This is the case of Little Miss Nobody. The dreadful heat of the Arizona desert is hard. scratching as far as the eyes can see. The landscape is dreadful. Its dirt crack dry under the weight of the sun. By July the 31st, 1960, the desert had been scorching by weeks of dry, brutal heat. The earth, cracking and unforgiving, held more than just dirt and sand. It was hiding a secret, one that remained buried for over 6 decades.
Wow.
On that fateful day, 2 young boys, aged 12 and 13, ventured into the desert, hoping to explore, to find some small treasures in the wild of the Arizona land. They had been out there before, climbing the ridge, poking through the scrubs and cactus, chasing after lizards and small creatures. But this time, what they found was far beyond their imaginations. As they wandered along the ravine, their footsteps faltered when they saw what lay before their eyes, a small figure. At first they thought it was a discarded bundle, something left behind. But as they approached, they saw more clearly. It wasn't just an object. It was a child body, twisted and skeleton, half buried beneath a sun bleached dark, no older than 3 to 6 years old. Her fragile frame crushed beneath the weight of the desert heat. The boys frozen. Their young mind couldn't process what they just saw. They ran back toward the nearest road, breathless, to tell an adult. The authorities were quickly notified, and soon the sheriff department arrived on the scene. But investigators began, the chilling reality became clear. The child's identity was a mystery. The body was so badly decomposed that it was impossible to determine how long she'd been there or what had caused her death. But the signs was clear. She had been abandoned. The child was alone, left to die in the unforgiving deserts, miles from any town or home. The first thing the authority had noticed was the clothes she wore. Nothing particularly unique, but enough to tell them she was likely not a local child. Her clothes didn't match the style of the nearby residents. She was dressed in a checkered blouse, faded from exposure to the sun, a color barely visible, but still enough to hit a pattern. The fabric was thin, worn down by the elements, suggesting she had been exposed to the scorching heat for some time. The blouse, once perhaps neat and vibrant, now hung loose on her small frame, thin and frame around the edges. Her tailor shorts was simple cotton fabric, likely once bright in color, but now dull from the age and the relentless desert sun. They were worn out, and the fabric at the edges, the hem barely intact, as if they had been through both rough use and unforgiving forces of nature. And on her feet, sandals, once practical for a child exploring a sunny world, were now scratched, the scrap torn in places, with one sandal almost completely detached from her foot. The sandal, no longer used for protection, seemed to tell a story of a long, painful journey she had endured before her final resting place in the desert. Her outfit was once simple and innocuous, now became a ghostly symbol of her tragic fate. It was as if she'd been abandoned in these very clothes, her innocence left behind in the parched landscape, a reminder that this little girl was just a child, not meant to die in such a desolated and unfeeling place. The clothes were the only connection the authorities had to this lost soul, but they provide no answers, no clues about who she was or where she came from. Her outfit, a ghostly trace of a life once lived. As investigators examined the body, they saw no signs of immediate trauma, no wounds from an attack, no obvious injury to indicate foul play. There is no sign that she'd been forced in the desert, as if she'd been left there intentionally, the victim of a cold, calculated act. Still, there was no clue to her identity. Her face was not immediately recognizable, and no missing child reports from a nearby area matched her description. She was a complete mystery, someone who vanished without a trace, with no one to claim her, no sign of a family, the girl became known as Little Miss Nobody. The authorities, though desperate, were stumped. They scoured the area, but no evidence emerged. There were no missing children in the area, and no one knew who she could be. Her name, her story, were lost to time, and the case grew cold. Little Miss Nobody became the name of the haunted town of Congress, Arizona, but few could remember the details beyond the headlines of 1960. Over the years, the case faded into limbo. Little Miss Nobody, as she'd been called, became a forgotten tragedy. Life went on for the people in Congress, Arizona. The case was tucked away in old files, the photograph of the child clothing yellowing with age. Her face, which had once haunted the small headlines, slowly faded from memory, and the world moved on. The question of who she was, who abandoned her, and why remains unanswered. As the years turned to decades, no leads surfaced. The cold desert with wind whispered across the unforgotten landscape, and the small grave of Little Miss Nobody was buried deeper in the sand of time. The desert seemed to hold its secrets, as though guarding them fiercely against who might seek the truth. And yet, a part of the mystery never let go. In the back of the minds of those who still remember, the question lingered. Who was she? And most fearful, who had taken her life?
In the year 2022, 62 years later, the case of Little Miss Nobody began to stir again, this time with the power of technology. By 2022, law enforcement had embraced the power of DNA and genetic genealogy to solve cold cases. In an age where technology had advanced in ways previously unimaginable, forensic scientists and genealogists began working together to crack cases that had once seemed unsolvable. And so the case of Little Miss Nobody was revisited. Forensic teams took a closer look at the skeletal remains recovered in 1960. With the advancements in DNA testing and the technique of genetic genealogy, they hoped to unlock the secrets that had eluded investigators for so long. DNA samples were extracted from the bones, and forensic scientists began the process of mapping the genetic code. At first, there was skepticism. The remains had been exposed to the harsh desert conditions for over 6 decades. Would DNA still be viable? Could they really uncover the answers after all this time? As it turned out, DNA testing was more advanced than anyone had expected. After months of analysis, the forensics team had a promising lead. They were able to retrieve enough genetic material from the bones to create a genetic profile, a unique set of identifiers that could be cross-referenced against DNA databases. But they needed more, something to match the profile to a living relative. This is where genetic genealogy played a crucial role. Genetic genealogy is a process where DNA from an individual is compared with DNA from public genealogical databases. These databases, which were initially built for people tracing their ancestry, have grown exponentially over the years. People from all over the world were submitting their DNA in hopes of uncovering their family roots. But what they didn't realize was that their DNA could help solve mysteries like this one. Law enforcement began submitting the DNA profile from Miss Little Nobody to genealogical databases, hoping to find a match. It was a long shot. The girl's remains had been lying in the desert for over 6 decades. Any potential relatives might not even know they were connected to her. But after several weeks of searching, a match was found. A distant cousin of the girl in the desert. Using this connection as a starting point, genealogists began to trace the family tree. They examined generations of family records, searching for names, birth certificates, and any other historical detail they could uncover. They worked tirelessly, building connections and narrowing down the possibilities. And then, after months of research, the unthinkable happened. They found a family member whose DNA closely matched the genetic profile of the girl in the desert. A girl named Sharon Lee Gallegos, a 4-year-old girl who had been abducted from her home in Alamogordo, New Mexico, just 10 days before her body was discovered in the Arizona desert. The news sent shockwaves through the town of Alamogordo, New Mexico. The case of Sharon Lee Gallegos, a missing child who had been abducted in broad daylight in July of 1960, had remained unsolved for over 6 decades. But now, the power of genetic genealogy, her identity was finally revealed. The summer of 1960 was supposed to be filled with warm evenings and the sounds of children playing in the streets. But on July the 21st, 1960, everything changed for one young family. Sharon Lee Gallegos, a bright and curious 4-year-old, would become one of the country's most tragic mysteries. A missing child whose story would remain unsolved over 6 decades. Sharon was playing outside her home on that fateful summer day. It was a typical afternoon with her parents focused on household chores, not suspecting that their world was about to be torn apart. Sharon had been playing near the street when, without warning, she was abducted. Witnesses reported seeing a man and a woman in a green car pull up to the curb where Sharon was playing. Before anyone could react, the couple grabbed Sharon, forced her into the vehicle, and sped off. Her family's frantic calls to the police quickly turned into an all-out search. The community of Alamogordo, along with the local law enforcement, launched an immediate effort to find Sharon. Her parents, especially her mother, were devastated by the sudden disappearance of their child. They couldn't fathom what happened. Sharon's bright eyes, dark brown hair, and a curious smile were now gone, stolen by 2 unknown strangers in a green car, vanishing without a trace. At the time, the town and surrounding areas were shocked. Children didn't just vanish like this. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. Search parties scoured the surrounding desert, towns, and nearby areas, hoping to catch a glimpse of Sharon, but there were no sightings of the child and no leads emerged. While the search for Sharon intensified, the case quickly grew cold. Police and the community's best efforts yielded no concrete answers. Weeks turned into months, and the absence of any solid clues led to the eventually fading of Sharon's case from the forefronts of the town's concerns. Sharon's parents were devastated by the loss of their little girl, had never given up hope that one day she would be found. But the discovery of her remains brought a bittersweet kind of closure. Sharon's name had finally been uncovered, but the circumstances of her death remained shrouded in darkness. While the discovery of Sharon Lee Gallegos' identity solved one part of the puzzle, it opened many more questions. How did she end up in Arizona? Why was she found so far from her home? Had she been kept alive after being taken? Or had she been abandoned immediately after her kidnapping? But perhaps the most haunting question of all remained. Who had killed Sharon? The circumstances surrounding her death remained unclear. Was she simply left to die in the desert, abandoned by her kidnappers? Or had she been murdered? Theories swirled, but there were no answers. The authorities had few leads, and the people of Congress, Arizona, were no closer to discovering the identity of the person who had taken the life of an innocent child. Despite DNA evidence leading to Sharon's identification, the case was still incomplete. While Sharon's family had found some measures of closure, they were left with the knowledge that the killer was still out there, a haunting presence lurking in the shadows, never brought to justice. The desert, which had once held Sharon's secret so tightly, continued to hold its silence. But now a new layer of questions sat on the windswept land, a mystery that would remain unsolved for the time being. Little Miss Nobody was no longer a nameless child in the desert. She was Sharon Lee Gallegos, but the true story of her life and her death remained hidden in the shifting sands of time. The desert, once silent, now seemed to echo with the unsolved question. Little Miss Nobody had found her name, but Sharon Lee Gallegos' story was not yet over. The search for her abductors and for the truth remains a painful reminder of a tragedy that still lingers in the dust. Before we end this case, let's remember the young girl, Sharon Lee Gallegos. Sharon Lee Gallegos was a young girl whose life was tragically cut short, but whose memory remains a saddening reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating impact of loss. Sharon was a bright, vibrant soul, full of potential and dreams that could have blossomed into something beautiful. She was cherished by her family, and her spirit touched those who knew her, even if only for a brief time. Her story is not just about her ultimate death, but about the deep love and the heartache that accompanied it. Sharon's parents, like all parents, had hopes and aspirations for her future. They saw in her a child full of promise, whose laughter could light up the room, and whose kindness was felt by all who crossed her path. Her parents wanted nothing more than to see her grow up, to see her thrive and succeed. But life had other plans. When Sharon was taken from them, it left a void that nothing could fill. The grief of losing a child is beyond words, a pain so deep that it's difficult for anyone who hasn't experienced it to truly understand. Sharon's parents, along with those who loved her, were left with an immense sense of loss. But even in their mourning, they remembered Sharon as the bright star she was, a reminder of the beauty that can be found in the most fleeting moments. Her story is of love, loss, and the memories that linger even after someone is gone. Sharon Lee Gallegos was not just a name or a statistic. She was a person who meant the world to those who knew her. In their hearts, she will always be remembered, and her memory continues to inspire a reflection of the importance of cherishing every moment with those we love and holding them close. Sharon may have left this world too soon, but she left an incredible mark on the hearts of her family, a love that will never fade. This is the case of Little Miss Nobody, Sharon Lee Gallegos. Now let's get into some theories.
Theories.
Let's get into some theories. Let's get into some theories. Everyone is a suspect until proven guilty. Let's get into some theories. Lesbian detectives. What type of thoughts you thinking? What theories running through your mind? I'm thinking all types of suspicion. Uncover the truth, what we can find. Witness say they saw somebody creeping out the back door. What you think they did it for? That's so crazy, I'm not sure. They found a car, where could she be? Here go another puzzle piece. Researching through your history. It's plenty unsolved mysteries. Everyone is a suspect until proven guilty. Let's get into some theories, yeah. Let's get into some theories. Let's get into some theories. Everyone is a suspect until proven guilty. Let's get into some theories. Lesbian detectives.
You or me?
Good.
This one is hard because, I mean, at least they figure out her name. And I'm gonna be honest, I hate they call her Little Miss Nobody. That name sucked. I mean, really sucked. But it was two people that kidnapped her, a man and a woman. It's two options. Well, it could be more than two, but let's say two options. That they kidnapped her to hurt her, or they kidnapped her to make her a child of theirs. I mean, it's only two options we can think of right now.
Right.
You know? I wonder, how did she end up in the desert? Do you think she just ran, like she didn't feel safe with them no more, and she was like, okay, I'm running away, and she got lost in the desert?
That could be a possibility.
Because describing her clothes, it seemed like she was in the desert so long, like walking around and seeing that way. Or do you think they just abandoned her, like, get out the car? But I don't think they did that. I mean, I don't know who they are, but it doesn't seem that type of way.
It's really not much to go by because you can't really tell if she was hurt. All that was left was the skeletal remains and her clothes, but the clothes had also been through the scorching sun, so you don't know. So they were saying that her shorts were like barely on her body or something like that. I mean, that could be a sign of either or. I don't know what goes on through people's minds where they would commit acts like this, but I do believe that they meant to hurt her.
Okay.
Because if they were trying to take care of her, I don't think she would have. I think they would have been more on alert. I think they had one use and then they discarded her. To me, that's what it seems like.
Okay. So you think they just like threw her out the car and like figure out your own way?
Yeah.
That's super more sad too.
Yeah.
I just feel sorry for her because what she went through. Because she was just 4 years old, like just outside playing, not thinking nothing in the world, and just got kidnapped. And they was very brave. You have to admit, this was broad daylight. People saw her getting kidnapped. So that's for them to do with that, out there, and I don't care if they get caught. That's crazy. Like, y'all didn't have no fear, because usually people do it like more in a sneaky way. They don't want to get caught. But these people like, what's up?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like they were pretty sloppy with it, and that's probably why, like, they were so careless. And that's probably why, too, like, they didn't really care for her afterwards, after they did what they needed to do. Also, the community, there wasn't any kidnappings at the time. It was a very safe place. Like, nobody saw it coming. So I do believe that it was people out of state, because this happened. She was from New Mexico, and she ended up in Arizona.
Far drive.
Very far drive. So it was people that weren't from around there. They didn't really care. They didn't really plan it. And then they just had one goal, but very sloppy with it.
Do you think they was from Arizona, or do you think they were like somewhere in the middle, or they were just like driving and driving?
I think they were just driving, passing by, and then maybe something happened. It could have been too that like she was fighting for her little life, and then maybe they hit her too hard one time, and that's all it took.
Yeah, I wonder, because technology is better. If somebody, I know I watch a lot of shows, but I'm into Bones now. If anybody watch Bones, you understand. Like, they look at bodies that's been in the ground for a long time. They really like dissect it and stuff like that. I wonder if we can get her body more, detailed looking, a more person that's more experienced in those type of bones to look at what might have happened to her. I think that will also give like the police more of a timeline or something, like to see if she was taken care of or see if she wasn't, that's a possibility.
That's far stretched for me.
I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, think about this. What they had technology in the 60s and what we have now is totally different.
I understand.
So it's a possibility.
I don't know how much a bone can tell you.
Bones tell secrets and stories.
I haven't watched that show clearly, but I mean, it could happen. I just don't know.
I mean, yeah. I mean, they were digging up bones like in where the Native Americans' lands was and telling their stories. So, never know. Let's end theories with our possibility. I think somebody unknown kidnapper. Well, you know what? I don't think it's unknown. I think they probably knew her and was watching her for a minute to kidnap her.
Why would they do it in broad daylight, though?
And I also believe they wasn't a part of that town, because they would known that car. Like, they'd be like, hold on, don't so-and-so drive that type of car? They would say something like that. So I don't think they was from that town. I feel like they probably was watching her for a minute outside and saw the parents went in and kidnapped her.
I think she was just at the wrong place at the wrong time because of how sloppy it happened. They were probably looking for a child, and that's the first one that they saw that they thought that they could kidnap.
Do you think they did this again, or is this their only victim?
Of course, they did it again.
I think they did it again, but I don't think they probably still like together. People like that toxic, they're not gonna stay together like long. They're too toxic. I mean, the Barbie and Ken situation, I know that. That situation. I'm not going into detail about that case. But what are your theories to end this case?
I believe that it was two strangers that were looking for a child. She happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Got abducted. They clearly had something in mind they wanted to do with her. Maybe they achieved it. Maybe they didn't. But at the end, I feel like they hurt her and dumped her in the desert. Because it's like, who goes and hangs out in the desert?
Right.
Only kids. Kids that are trying to find some treasure, which, I mean, they did. So they started the investigation or got the investigation in motion.
I agree with everything you said. Only thing I don't agree, I think she ran. I really think she ran. I think that was in the desert, like probably just sitting there like trying to hurt her, and she got tired and she probably just ran off and they couldn't get her, and she like probably hid under something.
Yeah, I mean at four you don't really know, but when you're a little bit older, you know that the desert is not a good place to flee.
Yeah.
You're basically signing your life away.
But sometimes fight or flight kick in, and
How deep was she in the desert?
she was deep in there.
Like how the kids that found her, they were 12
12 and 13.
12 and 13. Like I wonder how many miles from their house.
They never said her exact location. The police just said she was in the desert, deep in the desert. But for the 13 and 12-year-old to get in there, I don't feel like that was that far from the road.
That's what I'm saying.
So they probably stopped on the side of the road for a second, and she probably just ran out. We never know. Well, we never will know what really happened today until this case is solved. And hopefully it's solved soon, because the police are really working this case.
Yeah. I just think it makes more sense that the abductors put her in the desert because not a lot of people like to go in the desert.
Or a possibility they killed her before they put her in the desert.
Yeah, that too.
Probably something happened on their road trip, because I'm calling it a road trip because they was driving far. They probably were trying to take her somewhere, and something happened in a motel or hotel, and they were like, okay, we got to get this body away from us, and threw her in the desert.
Yeah.
That's another possibility. It's always different possibilities. We never know until the case is solved. And this case right here is solvable. We see the police working their butt off. I feel like technology probably is the way to solve this. I wish she had some type of DNA that was left on the body, on the clothes, or something that they could re-look at. I just wish like somebody who's like very good at this, like technology-wise, looking at bones or old clothes, can just take a look at this case. I feel like it's somebody out there. I feel like this world is so many smart and intelligent people. Like, you never know.
There's always a chance.
And let's be honest. For the police to use people's DNA to solve this case, I gave my DNA to like Ancestry and 23andMe. My DNA probably helped us solve a case. We never know.
Or it might land you in jail. You never know.
You know what? Can I get my DNA back? This is our case, guys. Tell me, what do you think? And do you guys agree? I'm going to put this as a poll. Do you guys agree that her name should have been Little Miss Nobody? We could have said something else. Little Miss Sunshine, Little Miss Arizona. You know what? I'm going to call her Little Miss Arizona. That's what we're going to name her, Little Miss Arizona. Tell me, what do you think about this case? Tell me, do you think it's solvable? Get in these comments, inbox me. Let me know what you think. We're on all social medias. We're on Rando, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Guys, I am getting us out there. I do true crime 1 minute. I actually just did a Julia Doe case just today. So please go check it out. And this is Lesbian Detective. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And we are signing out. And don't forget, everybody's a suspect.
So proven innocent.
Bye.
Lesbian Detectives. Unsolved cases. She's still missing. Yeah, they haven't found her yet. Well, let's talk about it.
They say he vanished without a trace. Could it be a psychotic break or a tragic accident? Police don't know where the body went. Unsolved murders, body still missing. That's unheard. Where's the witness? Lesbian detectives, what's going on? City on high alert, this out the norm. He did what, the who? Man, that ain't real, these crimes ain't true. Then come uncover these theories with us. We live right now, tuning in is a must.
Right now, Lesbian Detectives. Lesbian Detectives. We about to start the show, so get your popcorn ready, let's go. Pay attention to the message I present to you, the Lesbian Detectives.